Pivoting is admittedly a buzzword in the startup world that can get you eye-rolled out of the room. While pivoting is just startup speak for changing your idea, it's really more about iterating on and evolving your initial concept.
And that's where pivot kind of comes in.
All too often, though, just the idea of changing the course of your startup or business can be paralyzing. Do you stick around and see if things improve? Do you take the leap to something new and untested?
Don't be afraid to pivot and go in a new direction if needed.
All these founders and more have talked to us about where, when, why, and how they pivoted. We had to ask these founders and a venture capitalist how they found their perfect pivots. First, meet these serial entrepreneurs and co-founders of Nook, Mark and Chad, a startup that has evolved over time, fitting itself to the mold of the real, underlying problems in the remote work niche that they discovered through trial and error.
So I'm a strong believer in sunk cost. And sunk cost is you always make the best decision for the future, independent of the investment you made in the past. But the point is, when we look at companies and our strategy and our products and all that, we always figure out what is the best investment for us for the future. And that's where pivot kind of comes in. So when you decide, hey, this is probably the best bet for us in the future, you just turn the ship super quick around. We're not the Titanic. That's the whole benefit of being a startup.
And I think that's really important to make the decision, but also then start to do it very swiftly, at least internally.
When you switch, yeah, it might be painful for some people, but that's where we believe the future is, and you just do it.
So yeah, I think the first challenge is actually internally getting over that mental fear of making the decision to do it. And that's part of the pivot process, I think, is to make up your mind, don't waver on it, because that becomes completely chaos if you start to do all these little second guesses along the way. And that's a big part of it.
Pivoting, ideally, shouldn't be an earth-shattering moment. It should make sense as the next step of refining your startup, assessing the tools and team available to you, reevaluating your market, and talking regularly with your customers. In fact, a thriving startup should already be doing all of those things.
Yeah, and in terms of product, there's always going to be some fallout from it. What we're hoping we're doing, though, is we're actually taking the best of breed from what we've learned and transitioning it into the new product. We've listened to a lot of users. Feedback is key. We know what the majority or the larger pain problem is. We know we're not going to make everyone happy, but we do want to solve a real problem. And I think usability and functionality, but also solving the right problem are important.
Chad and Mark are right on the money. No one likes the idea of changing up the plan after investing a lot into it. But you don't want to continue investing more time and effort and money if it's clear some reevaluating is in order. And there's no real way to know that without talking to your real users and asking yourself if this feels compelling to you. Check out our video about getting really useful user feedback for more on that, but in the meantime, don't get hung up on that sunk cost fallacy.
Wait, the what? The fallacy of sunk cost. It's what gamblers do. It's like, I've already spent this much money or time or whatever. I gotta keep going.
But how do you get over that fear of the jump?
The number one piece of advice that I would give to entrepreneurs is don't be afraid to pivot.
That's Matty, and he's the CEO and founder of a hemp-based insulation startup. He's had to adapt and overcome throughout the development process.
Being an entrepreneur is a delicate balance between maniacally planning everything and going with the flow and seeing where that takes you, because pivoting can bring you away from a business plan and sometimes is urgently needed. I think we get so focused on one specific idea that we need to, be open to moving on or adjusting your sails. To further that metaphor, when the wind changes direction and you don't change your sails and you'd wonder why you're not going anywhere, that's not being responsive to what's around you. So don't be afraid to pivot, because it can really result in positive change if you actually honor that and go with it.
So maybe there is something to change. Maybe it's not all bad. But let's hear from Jules Miller, a VC and 3-time entrepreneur who has seen startups at every stage. She even co-founded IBM Blockchain Ventures, a project niche that knows all too well the importance of agile digital disruption.
The startup world is a roller coaster, and when you hit a kind of down point on that roller coaster, I think having a real hard self-reflection on, is this just a normal down cycle and we'll come back up? Or is this really problematic and we have to change something? And if we change something, will it go back up? And if something has plateaued and something's not working, the responsibility of the founders with their investors as coaches is to figure out how serious that problem is and how you fix that problem. Of course, there's plenty of ways to pivot or to repair something that's not working. So I think number one is if it's a people problem, you change the people. There are certainly people that hit a personal maximum point where they just aren't the right person for that thing anymore. And sometimes you can bring in some fresh energy and fresh experience, and then the company can really take off. Sometimes it's pivoting what the product does or how it's sold, right? You can go from, for example, a direct sales model to channel partnership. There's also fundamentally, like, is the technology being applied in the right way to the right problem and the right business? I've seen companies where they start with a tech product that does one thing in an industry, but then actually pivots and is like much better served doing something else. Again, all of this is about fit. So founder goes, okay, this is really interesting. The tech is really valuable, but it's probably not going to scale in the way we need it to hit those kind of 10x returns, but it's still a good business and we're still making money and there's still really interesting opportunities for the tech. If you hit that point where the company's just not working at the scale that you need it to, you have options. If something's working, right? If nothing is working, yes, the company's probably going to shut down. But if something is there that's actually working, there are multiple different paths to go with that.